Hey everyone, and welcome to the Offsite podcast, where we chat all things construction, technology, and everything in between. My name's Carlos, and I spend most of my days talking to construction teams about how we deliver projects.
And I'm Jason, and I spend most of my time building and designing software that construction teams use to deliver their projects.
So today we're talking about the mammoth amount of wind farms being built around the world, Hinkley Point C, and Ferrovial's new Metaverse, which they've named Infraverse.
Can't wait.
First up, wind farms. Now, everyone knows there's a big push for renewables. It's hard to miss that. But to give a little bit of context around the scale, because I don't know much about wind farms, so I just wanted to know, what are we actually doing in construction world? So in the EU, 2022, we delivered 15 gigawatts worth of turbines. That translates to about 3,000 new turbines, which is 30% up from the year before, so it's obviously growing massively. No mean feat from a construction point of view, as they're all, I think they average 300 feet plus. So Jason, as an engineer, what's the immediate challenge here?
So like as an engineer or as a project manager, my brain immediately goes to like, how would I manage that type of project? And like each project normally has like something about it that's uniquely challenging. And for a wind farm project, like these turbines are massively spread apart. And so when you've got 3,000 of them or whatever the project is, or 100 of them or something, like you're talking about a project over such a large geographical area. Add on top of that, if it's offshore, right? If you think about how like you would manage on a day-to-day basis a project that's a couple of kilometers or miles of rail or road or something, the go-to is obviously like everyone in a room once a day, or all the engineers in a room once a week.
Routine.
Yeah, and so like that, all those things suddenly become challenged. Like booking inspections, like the time for someone to make it to an inspection.
Yeah.
The logistical challenge associated with that type of project, I think, would be what's unique about it. So I think a project like that must need to lean on, I guess, one, better planning, because better planning is like the antidote to logistical challenges normally.
Yep.
And then probably some way of virtually replacing everyone in a room once a day or everyone in the room once a week. I'm just reflecting on some projects that we've worked on before.
You're putting me on the spot here. But yeah, there was a massive wind farm project in Norway. Yeah, the logistics is nuts because we were primarily used for the infrastructure. It's not just the sort of, they build pad foundations which are going to facilitate the turbine structures, but they actually had to build infrastructure to deliver the job because you're in the middle of nowhere, there's no roads, and you need trucks and deliveries and everything else to come. So it was pretty mega, but it was clear that a company like Vestas, they're not like a typical contractor.
Wait for the game, Joe.
I need to stop. You're doing that. It's not like a typical contractor where you've got big white-collar teams on the ground. They clearly have a relatively small central team managing projects around the world, and they're just sort of ticking over. So it was clear to them that they needed tech. They had things like Teams, and obviously Apex then allowed them to actually remotely collaborate around a plan and be able to build out as a team, which is geographically spread around the world. So yeah, pretty interesting.
So we've got this geographically spread out project. So typically if you think about what would happen on a construction project, normally you think about the org chart, you've got projects are normally like broken up geographically. So you'll have like the East team or this technical team, and then so there's a manager that's like co-located with their sub-team, and they're kind of, maybe some people on a cabin and some people in an office kind of nearby that's like a 10-minute walk or something.
You're interacting with each other.
Yeah, you kind of, but then at some point on this project, you've got to have people that are, let's even take an offshore. They're nowhere near, or there might be like an hour and a half's drive or something from other people. Yeah, it's like a significant challenge. I think like planning is like the antidote to logistical challenges. So like being aware of inspections, instead of booking them the day before, you've got to book them a week before. If you need materials to an area, you need to plan for those materials 2 weeks before.
You're not calling in concrete from a batching plant.
No, you're not calling in concrete. And I don't know if you've seen, but the size of the foundations on these wind turbines are enormous.
Yeah.
I think there's that case study on the website that shows one of the footings for a project in Norway, and they're mega. So massive projects with, the good thing about them is they're very repeatable, right? Like once you build one footing, they're often
I'd imagine
clones of each other.
pad is the same spec.
So from like what type of challenges you typically get on projects, this is probably like 20 out of 10 on logistics, and then maybe less complex on everything being unique to itself. Like if you compare it to something like a rail project like Crossrail, where like every station there were like completely different challenges.
Yeah, you can imagine you're building structures, tall structures in high wind locations. Even that alone, you're like screwing yourself on the conditions immediately.
You'd have to. Every project would have to have a weather expert that guesses the weather.
Yeah.
Today we're going to do it. Maybe not.
Talking of craneage, good segue into Hinkley Point C. So this week we saw, I think Ed Miliband was visiting Hinkley. There's a big theme and agenda around nuclear energy, hydrogen. Nuclear is obviously a big, reliable source of energy, and at the moment with the likes of Ukraine, obviously we can see that. I
like how you segued via craneage and not via like wind versus nuclear, just to keep it not controversial.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Let's keep people guessing. It's a clear reliance on importing energy, so there's obviously a big drive for nuclear. But the opposite problem to a wind farm, which is spread over miles or hundreds of miles, you've now got crazy congested sites, which are obviously costly. And how do you start to think about that from a logistical point of view?
Like you said, it's like the opposite problem. I reflect on a LNG project done as like a young engineer, and
LNG,
liquefied natural gas,
right?
Fossil fuels.
Yeah,
go right. Do you want me to say?
I remember those.
Yeah. Got it. When you would try to maneuver around the site, when things were being built, the size of like laydowns and the coordination of like laydown of the materials for this person or this team, because you've got essentially, take like Hinkley, it's like a whole city of buildings, and like it's not just building this building, it's building this building while the neighboring building is being built, and like your cranes are next to each other. I imagine probably a bunch of them, I don't know, maybe are in the same slew path as each other. So like the entire opposite problem to like a wind farm. I would imagine, and reflecting on what we used to have to do was like, planning in ahead for like what space I need to lay stuff down. If I'm in 6 months going to install pipe racks or something, where are those going to be stored? Well, at the moment they're being occupied by another contractor, and then another contractor is going to come in and use the space. So there become like a lot of interrelationships between different, whether it's contractors or teams in the same company, around like space being used across the site. You might call like the communal spaces.
How does that actually get managed though? So surely you've got lots of teams that aren't even managed by the same individuals. Are they fighting for it? Or is there a planner somewhere saying, based on schedule, this area needs to be for these guys first?
On this type of, like on that size of project, again, drawing like on my own experience, the type of stuff that's obstructing one team from another, like that one person's putting in the space that another person is not the type of stuff that gets picked up and moved in a day. So you can't really fight for it. It's not like there's a fight on a day-to-day basis of who's going in this space. It's usually like I'm 3 to 6 months out. Like my delivery is arriving, I'm planning to put it here. Your stuff needs to be gone. Is that getting, because if that's getting delayed, then we've got a problem. Should I be talking to my supplier about delivery dates? Often, like, especially on these projects, like stuff is more and more prefabricated and modularized. These modules also have a storage yard that is not infinite. So like stuff backs up and backs up and backs up. Long range planning and high level coordination of that space is super important. I imagine there's probably also some amount of day-to-day shit fight around.
Obviously you've
cranes moving, and
you've got your like plant and materials. Presumably as they're moving, you're actually shifting logistics route, like pedestrians and haulage.
Actually, I take that back. There would definitely be a day-to-day shit fight around all that stuff.
Is that unsafe? Is that like seen as a risk when you change pedestrian routes because it's new and it's unfamiliar? Is that a factor?
I imagine it would definitely be. On a project that has like a fairly static route, you can build quite an infrastructure around it, so people don't go off that route. But if it's constantly changing, like the standards can slip and all that sort of stuff. So I imagine there is some element of that. But yeah, now that you mention it, like definitely like a crane moving from one spot to another, like a haul route or something, if there's any like trucks moving anything, that would definitely be a day-to-day shit fight. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how they manage that. But
Especially if you're moving big car.
If you're moving big car, everyone just has to get out of the way.
They actually had to build its own like railway tracks cast into the ground for it to shift
So
along.
then even like crossing those tracks would be like, you'd have to probably build up a temporary platform to cross them.
Yeah.
It would be a battle.
Yeah, the scale is it's crazy. Obviously, we luckily got to see it the other day, and I think that was.
Oh, that's right. You were out. When did you go out to Hinkley?
Back end of last year. So went on a site tour. There was something like 56 tower cranes. Like, yeah, each tower crane. You're going to correct my construction language here, but the turning circles all overlap.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. The slew radius would definitely like.
Yeah.
Conflict.
So they were all like, there's like this whole operation just to turn them all.
You know, like I just have this image of like this one at the end wants to turn, so this one needs to turn, so and then
they were just all to do one lift on the other side. Yeah, I don't get it. But anyway, right. So final topic: Ferrovial have been shouting in the news about something called Infraverse, which has been sort of loosely described like a metaverse. They claim it pulls together.
And you say loosely described, as in it's in the name.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's something that's relatable, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, people like me can understand it then.
Okay.
So they say it pulls together virtualization, augmented reality, AI, behavioral science, digital twins, the whole list of tech stuff. And it's being tested on a bunch of projects. A lot of the content is buzzwordy, from collaboration to immersive stuff. What's your thoughts on the initial
software
information we can see?
You're asking me. Well, given I don't even know what the metaverse is, to me, and it's just a bunch of bobbleheads talking to each other.
I think it's like a Facebook version of The Sims, right?
Yeah. So it's the bobblehead version of The Sims.
Yeah.
Given I don't know what that is, I guess if you go back like a couple of years when like everything BIM was like the hot topic, you just group like a bunch of concepts and just jam it like it's all BIM enabled. It does feel like they've just taken a bunch of things and jammed it together and tried to make a word that sounds like metaverse.
Yeah. It looks good on the pitch of the tender.
I have no idea what it is though.
Yeah. So we on Crossrail, we had, I can't remember the name for it.
Beep that one, Joe.
They had these square rooms where they had like 4 projectors to produce like 360 images of what was effectively the BIM model. And you could go in without, you could wear the goggles and you could sort of move around and look at stuff. It was like shit and gimmicky. It was just the BIM team or people that didn't have real jobs playing in it, and that they used it to show visitors. So it was like a flashy thing, but it didn't really add actual value. Do you reckon, from the limited information that we have, do you reckon it's somewhere in there, or do you think they've actually...
I think at some point something like this is going to be valuable. I think the main problem that it's like seems to try and solve is around communication of the site constraints, maybe communication of a plan if we think about 4D type things. Anything headset related always ends up like you cannot put 50 people in a room and unless they don't even have enough budget for a hard hat so you're not getting 100 VR headsets anytime soon. So anything like that feels kind of really gimmicky and just for a sales pitch for someone visiting the site or something. But communication being this like core problem of getting more and more people across a project aware of how it's going to be built, how their part feeds into it. That is a major problem in construction to be solved. Anything in that space would be valuable. I don't see headsets doing it. We have seen examples of things like in the article they use a mission room.
Yeah. And
like we've seen the mission room be used on a couple of different projects. It works well for like, I don't know, what size of room would you say?
Anything more than 20, 25 people, it's tough.
Yeah, so you can do quite a like substantive meeting with like leads of an area, or if the project wasn't too big, you could stagger like sub teams in there. But like on the projects that we've seen that used, it works. That's better than a bunch of headsets.
Yeah, you touch on the learning how the job is built. Previous jobs, and bearing in mind I was a QS, not an engineer, so you just get slapped a bunch of drawings and then you kind of look at a program, but you don't really think, right, it's base, slab, and columns and how the job is sequenced.
Yep.
And I've seen a whole bunch of decent ones that I think Synchro produces and a few others where they show slabs going in and then walls and then everything else. So it's good from a surface level to see how the job is kind of built.
Yep.
But it's definitely not enough to actually plan because it's so high level. So I think it's serving a purpose, but the thing that gets me with those visualizations is like people post saying, oh, and it took me 4 weeks to build. I'm like, what?
Because the plan changes on site every day, so if you need 4 weeks to build it, like it's game over. But yeah, that's definitely true. Like there's, like when you would start on a project as an engineer, you'd spend like, you'd still be like 6 months in discovering, learning what, by the end, the whole set of plans become like intuitively navigable.
Yeah.
But it takes an age to get there.
Yeah. And you end up with that weird project language that no one else understands.
Yeah. You end up, just from the set of drawings, you can walk through the project in your mind.
Yeah.
But that takes a lot of time, and not like that's only a subset of people on the project that have that much exposure to the plans that you.
Yeah. And it's the good project managers. You say something and you can see them think for 1 second. They go, "There's no way that's."
Yeah. There's no riser in that area.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. So, summary of that topic is it's a gimmick.
We've just made a wild set of assumptions of what it is and then slagged it off, which is great. So keen to see actually what it is when they release a bit more information. Right, that's all we got time for today. As always, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.